The British elite absolutely hate Britain, but love Europe and the European Union. It's always an interesting thing, isn't it, that so many other countries, the leaders actually love the country that they're from, whereas in Britain, it just really isn't the case. In this video, I go through and explain my theory as to why that is what happens in Britain. Hello everyone, this is Andre Walker. Thank you so much for watching this video. Please do subscribe, but more importantly, hit the bell notification icon. It's the best way to absolutely guarantee you get all of my videos as soon as they are released. Well, there's a remarkable snobbery, isn't there? If you freely admit that you voted to leave the European Union, you won't be Mr. or Mrs. Popular in some of the more middle class and upper class houses in Britain. Some people think that the elite are simply just selling out their own people for financial gain. And I think there is, to an extent, at least some of that. But, oh, by the way, I've got to say to you, I remember I was on Sky News once and they were going, we need Europeans to come over so they can do the jobs that we don't want to. And I said, I think it's terribly racist to force somebody to clean your toilet just because they're Polish. And the woman who was interviewing me actually did have a Polish cleaner. But anyway, I slightly digress. I think to myself that we look at the elite and we often think, well, they've got a financial vested interest in being part of the European Union. And yeah, okay, that's fair enough. Slave labour that came into the United Kingdom has made the rich richer and the poor poorer. So that is something that is definitely true. But actually, people loved the European Union and loved Europe before a lot of these financial benefits came in. Actually, I think the truth lies somewhere with a TV show called Keeping Up Appearances. Do you remember that? Mrs. Bucket, it's bouquet. And you wonder, you think, it's quite interesting, isn't it? Why did she want the name Bucket pronounced bouquet? The reason is because it sounds more French. It's got nothing to do with what these particular implements are. And actually, if you look in the United States of America, Stephen Colbert, he became Stephen Colbert when he got on the television. Actually, if you go back to 1066, the invasion of Britain by the Normans, by the French, since then, we have always in this country believed that everything that is French is superior and everything that is British is inferior. If you look at things like, as an example, on a farm, it's called a pig. When it's on your table, it's called pork. Pig being Anglo-Saxon, pork being French. If you think about it, it's called a cow in the field. But when it's turned into a lovely steak, it's called beef. A cow being the Anglo-Saxon, beef being the French, mutton, sheep, and so on and so forth. Everything that is considered French is considered good, where everything that's British is considered bad. The British are just the farm workers and the nobodies and the brutes, the Kiss Me Quick Hat Brigade, whereas the French are sophisticated and different and marvellous and all this sort of thing. If you go to a good restaurant in the United Kingdom, the menu is often written in French, much to the bemusement of tourists who come to London. And so we sit there and we think to ourselves, how have we developed a culture in the United Kingdom that is disdainful of Britain? How have we ended up in a situation whereby we're not proud of our country? We may be supporters of the monarchy and lovers of France, but we're not lovers of Britain. And I think that actually part of this is the culture that we've been force-fed. I remember reading a book where they said that the Battle of Waterloo was won on the playing fields of Eton. And you think, how many countries in the world are so elitist that we completely forget all of the soldiers that fought in the Battle of Waterloo, and instead think about just one or two commanding officers who happened to go to Eton College? This idea constantly that elite is what the country is all about and the elite are French. I think that we need to change that. I think we need to start saying that we're proud of Britain. I remember Steve Bannon saying that he hated the phrase flyover states, this idea that only the East Coast and West Coast of America were of any value and everything else was just the bit you flew over. And he said, it's not the flyover states, it's the backbone of America. I think we need to be proud of, as an example, the military contribution of the people of Burnley in the First and Second World War. I think we need to start thinking about Britain instead of big country estates. We need to start thinking about the ordinary working class people that built the country, because I think there's a great story there, isn't there? Whether you talk about Peterloo, whether you talk about the Peasants' Revolt, whether you talk about, I don't know, the signing of the Magna Carta, which probably was a bit more middle class than the Peasants' Revolt. But, you know, what Tyler goes and speaks to the king and demands the rights of ordinary people. And then you have, you know, Magna Carta, all of these things. We have actually got something that's great in this country. Where it comes from is not the Normans, it's the Anglo-Saxons. You know, that idea of individualism is Saxon law, that idea that of individual property, that idea that everybody should have their own voice, admittedly didn't exist in Saxon Britain, but certainly it was starting to be built up at that point. And so I think we need, as a country, and we are a very old country, to finally get over 1066. I think we need to finally accept that just because William the Conqueror successfully invaded Britain, and by the way, the English army was significantly depleted because we defeated a Danish invasion just a couple of months earlier. I think we need to accept, after 1,000 years, that the English should not be doffing their cap to the French all the time. That people like Keir Starmer, that people like His Majesty the King should suddenly start to recognise the greatness of the country that we live in. And as I say, I think we have got a lot of things that we can say that's great about it, but the opportunity to sell out this country is always too delicious for the elite to say no to, because they don't value this country, they don't love this country. There is a reason that John Bercow and Keir Starmer negotiated with Michel Barnier behind the back of the British government to get Britain an inferior Brexit deal, because they think their loyalty to Europe is more important than their loyalty to Britain. And you're talking about, at the time, Keir Starmer was in the shadow cabinet and John Bercow was the Speaker of the House of Commons. What country on earth would have a Speaker of its national parliament negotiating against the back of its own government in order to ensure the country got an inferior deal? Think of the moral bankruptcy of that. And of course, because they think of themselves as the French elite, they don't mind doing that. Well, I think it's treasonous, and I think it's got to stop. And I think it's time to be proud to be British. And I'll tell you something. I was reading the other day, as you might imagine, I like a bit of food every now and again. I was reading the other day about British recipes before the Second World War. And of course, what had happened with rationing, a lot of things that we used to take for granted in English kitchens disappeared, which is why even when I grew up in the 1980s, a lot of British food was quite bland. But actually, it's not true to say that French food is better than British food. You know, cooks have been making things like kedgeree and fish and chips for hundreds of years in Britain. And nutmeg used to be an incredibly popular spice in Britain. And so I'd just give an example of food, because I think it's just one thing that we need to say is not boring and bland and terrible. I think a steak and ale pie down your local pub with some mashed potatoes is an absolutely fantastic thing, and it beats the hell out of snails and frogs' legs any day of the week. Let's be proud to be British. Let's say to ourselves, 1066, 1,000 years ago, it's time to get over it. And just because the French beat us in one war 1,000 years ago should never mitigate the fact that we've beaten them in every single one ever since. Well, our elite don't love you, but I do. Thank you so much for watching this video. Until next time.